Okay, so you're here with us for this deep dive, and we have one lined up just for you. Today, we're going to really get into the mind of Bob Camblin, like who he was as an artist and as a person. He was a really influential artist and spent quite a bit of time here in Houston.
Absolutely. And I think we have a really fascinating collection of stuff to look at today.
Yeah.
There's this YouTube video that gives a symbolic glimpse into Camblin's work. We've also got excerpts from some of his writings, selections from his biography. And then there are also some really insightful writings from reviews and forewords about his art and his thought.
Yeah, so our goal for this deep dive is to really get to the heart of the themes he kept coming back to and what made his perspective on art and life so different from everyone else. Really try to unlock some of those aha moments as we navigate his work and his life. Camblin's world is full of paradoxes and unconventional wisdom, which makes him all the more interesting. So, Bob Camblin, born in Oklahoma in 1928, it sounds like art wasn't just a career for him, it was almost like something he was born into.
Yeah, totally. Both of his parents were artists. So,
Yeah.
he's surrounded by art constantly from his earliest years. Even in high school in Ponca City, Oklahoma, he took on this leadership role as the art director for the yearbook.
Yeah.
It really shows this early and active engagement with the visual.
And Ponca City itself seems like it must have been a really fertile ground for his imagination. You've got the energy of the oil boom era, the grandeur of the Marland estate, and that iconic pioneer woman statue.
Yep.
It's so interesting that the biography mentions that he would subtly work the statue into his pieces as double VVs, which was like this personal symbol for his mother, Viva Camblin. It's like these early visual things he was seeing were already becoming this fundamental part of his artistic language. It's like these visual anchors and the general atmosphere of where he grew up created this really rich internal landscape that he would draw on later on in his more abstract work. And it wasn't just the physical environment either. The biography mentions that seeing The Wizard of Oz in 1938 had a really big impact on him. That combination of the familiar with the fantastical must have been so powerful to him as an artist.
Then there's his long friendship with Forrest Harrisberger, which actually started all the way back in high school art class. That creative partnership seemed to be something he always came back to. Even when they were serving in the Air Force Reserve, they would sketch the California coastline together. I mean, they were activated for the Korean War. To think that they had this shared artistic language from such a young age, it must have been really powerful for them. I think it's hard to overstate how important that early creative connection must have been. They had this shared practice and this mutual understanding that probably provided a vital foundation for both of them as artists. And it continued after their military service as well. They both went on to attend the Kansas City Art Institute. This time period is really when you start to see Camblin's deep intellectual curiosity come out, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. The biography paints him as a really voracious reader. It says he was devouring books on Ralph Waldo Emerson, the I Ching, and even haiku and haiga, sometimes even during classes. You can really imagine all these different philosophical and artistic threads coming together in his mind and leading him to his own way of seeing things. It makes you wonder how these interests that seem so different started to fit together for him.
Yeah, that's interesting. What's fascinating is how these things he was reading about and learning started to inform his visual thinking. The I Ching is all about constant change and interconnectedness.
Hmm.
Emerson focused on things like individualism and intuition. And then you have haiku, which is all about this distilled essence of poetry.
Hmm.
For Camblin, these weren't just academic things he was reading. They were providing a framework for how he created and how he looked at the world. For example, you can actually see the influence of haiku in how spare and symbolic some of his later work is.
Then he gets a Fulbright scholarship to go to Italy. For an artist, that's a huge deal. It must have been completely transformative. He had this fascination with the Grand Masters, the Impressionists, and then these really striking, maybe even unsettling images of Venice, the Uffizi Gallery, and the catacombs of the Capuchins in Palermo, which he actually called mummies. It's like he was seeing the very best of art, but at the same time, the stark reminder of death.
Yeah, I think that time in Italy was really crucial for him developing his visual language and his philosophy. The Renaissance is all about this sheer scale and mastery, while the Impressionists captured this fleeting beauty, and then you've got the catacombs that force you to think about death and the ephemeral nature of life. It's almost like he was wrestling with these big questions about existence, beauty, and decay. This wasn't just sightseeing, it was a deep dive into what it means to be human.
And the biography even points to specific pieces that really impacted him. Botticelli's The Birth of Venus was a touchstone for his tribute to KPFT radio, and Botticelli's Primavera inspired his masked and symbolic Flora. It's so interesting to see how he wasn't just passively taking in these works, but engaging with them, reinterpreting them through his own lens as a 20th century artist, almost like he was having a conversation with these artists across time.
Yeah, for sure. He wasn't just copying what he saw. He was taking these masterpieces and looking at them through his own unique experiences and point of view. His reimagining of The Birth of Venus for a local radio station is a great example of how he could take these huge historical themes and bring them into his own time and make them relevant to this community.
So after Italy, he comes back to the States and works as a map maker for a little while before going on to teach art at different universities. He taught at Ringling, Illinois, Detroit, and Utah. He was clearly really dedicated to sharing his knowledge and passion for art. Then he gets to Rice University here in Houston, and the biography says he found a more vibrant and receptive art community here. It sounds like Houston really had the right energy for him.
Yeah, Houston in the late 60s and early 70s is becoming this really exciting art center, and Rice University was a big part of that. But here's where things take a huge turn. In 1976, Camblin decides to leave the security of teaching and become this nomadic artist. That's not just a career change, it's a whole life change.
It really was. He funded his travels by selling his art. It says he traveled to Italy, France, Ireland, Mexico, and the South Pacific, drawing inspiration from all these different cultures. It says a lot about how dedicated he was to his art. He wanted to experience the world directly and let that fuel his work instead of being stuck in the academic world.
Definitely. I think it shows just how important firsthand experience was to him and how much he believed in his art. He made his whole life a part of his art, always looking for new perspectives from all the different cultures he encountered.
Now let's talk about his artistic philosophy and the style he developed. The biography says his art was about transcending traditional criticism and the art market, that he wanted to connect with the viewer's soul. That's a really ambitious goal for an artist.
It really is. It shows that he wasn't interested in the typical ways of measuring an artist's success, like getting good reviews or selling a lot of work. What's interesting, though, is that his early works actually dealt with themes of social protest. It seems like at first he was more engaged with what was going on politically, but then shifted his focus inward and started to explore more philosophical ideas.
And then his style evolves in a way that is really unique. He becomes known for his mouches volantes, those optical illusions he created with just dots and dashes. For someone who's never seen one before, can you describe what they look like and what kind of effect they have?
Well, imagine you're looking at a canvas, and it's covered in these seemingly random dots and dashes, but as you keep looking, your eye starts trying to find patterns. These shapes start emerging and disappearing. The term mouches volantes actually translates to flying flies, like those little dots you sometimes see floating in your vision. Camblin was really interested in that and wanted to use it in his art to create this dynamic and somewhat elusive viewing experience. It's not like a flat image. It forces you to really use your perception.
It sounds like he really wanted people to be active participants when they looked at his art, not just passive observers. Collaboration also seems to have been very important to him. The happenings and exhibitions he did with Earl Staley and Joe Tate under the names B&E Productions and the holding firm really challenged the idea that artists have to create alone.
Yeah, they totally did. These collaborations were about breaking the rules and questioning this traditional idea that artists are these lone geniuses working in isolation. For Camblin, art could be about shared creativity, about dialogue, about a more fluid and less ego-driven approach to creating and showing art. It suggests that he believed in the power of collective energy and that there was something powerful about artists working together.
And that collaborative spirit seems to connect with his habit of signing his work as anonymous or anonymous artists. It really downplays the individual ego and emphasizes this collective or universal expression. What do you think motivated that choice?
That's a big question. It really takes the focus off the artist as this big name or brand and puts it on the art itself and the possibility of a shared human experience. It makes you wonder about what an artist's role really is, about what it means to be the creator of something, and whether the message of the art or the way it makes you feel is more important than who made it. I also wonder if he was trying to make a statement against the art world's focus on big names and how much money a piece is worth.
The book review of The Art of Everything describes his art as paradoxes made visible, and then they use the example of a trap that doesn't trap. That phrase really gets at the feeling that things aren't always what they seem in his work. Can you talk more about what some of these paradoxes might have been saying?
Well, think about a trap that doesn't trap. Maybe it represents the limits we put on ourselves, the fears or beliefs that we think are holding us back, but they don't have any real power over us unless we let them. It's about how our perception and reality don't always match up. His art is full of these kinds of contradictions, the tension between being free and being trapped, between the things we can see and the things we can't, between what lasts and what fades away. It forces us to question what we think we know and look deeper than the surface.
Illusion, impermanence, the exploration of these traps, fear, time, the limits we make for ourselves, all these themes he kept going back to really show that he was deeply engaged with what it means to be human and how we can get stuck in our own ways of seeing.
Right. He's using his art to investigate these anxieties that we all share and maybe offer a way to see through them. The theme of impermanence, which connects back to his interest in Eastern philosophy, reminds us that everything changes. Maybe he's encouraging us to focus on the present moment or let go of our need to control everything.
And then there's the theme of stillness, which is interesting because it has this double meaning. It can be a source of peace and reflection, but it can also be about stagnation and not moving forward. That's a pretty sophisticated way of looking at stillness.
Yeah, it is. Stillness isn't good or bad in itself. It depends on the context and what our intentions are. Camblin's art asks us to look at how we relate to stillness. Are we finding comfort and insight in quiet moments, or are we using stillness to avoid engaging with life or growing as people? It's a call to be more aware of our inner state.
The biography also mentions that his later works explore the idea of metamorphosis from an evolutionary standpoint, and he incorporates all these recurring symbols like puppets, scarecrows, skulls, and murky water. The biography even suggests that he might have been influenced by people like Freud, de Chirico, Grunewald, Kazantzakis, and Grass. That's a lot of different influences to unpack. For someone who's not familiar with those names, what do you think they say about the direction his work was heading in?
Well, I think it shows that he was getting more interested in things like the unconscious mind. That's where Freud comes in. Then there's De Chirico, who explored surrealism and the uncanny, and Grunewald, who focused on the grotesque and transformative. You've got Kazantzakis, who was all about existential struggles, and then Grass, who wrote about the complexity of human nature and society. These symbols he used, like the puppets and scarecrows, might represent how we feel controlled or manipulated by outside forces. And the skulls, well, they're a reminder of death. The murky water could symbolize the subconscious mind, something primal or a state of change. I think his work becomes increasingly symbolic and multi-layered, and he starts to look at life, death, and rebirth through this more psychological and philosophical lens.
The connection between words and images in his drawings sounds complex too. Words can be a disguise, a clue, or just a shape on the surface. It's almost like he's questioning whether we depend too much on words to make sense of art. The biography even brings up Tom Wolfe's The Painted Word in this context. What do you make of that?
Well, the painted word is a critique of how art theory sometimes dictates how we should understand and value art. I think bringing it up suggests that Camblin was playing with the role of language in his work. He wanted you to question how much you rely on words to make sense of art. The words in his drawings don't always have a clear meaning. Sometimes they're even intentionally misleading. Other times they're more like visual elements that just add another layer to the puzzle instead of giving you the answer.
And it all comes back to this idea that you, the viewer, have to be an active participant. His works are like puzzles to solve, and there are these traps that might lead you down the wrong path. He wasn't making art to be just passively consumed.
Not at all. He really wanted you to get involved, to work for it. He wanted you to bring your own experiences and interpretations to the work. It's like this intellectual dance where you're trying to decipher these visual and textual clues, but there might not be one right answer.
The biography says that he wanted to challenge people's expectations of what's real, to go beyond surrealism, and even to remake Goya in 20th century terms. He wanted to focus on the subjective world of human symbols. That's a really bold goal as an artist. For those who might not be familiar with Goya, what do you think Camblin saw in his work that he wanted to reinterpret?
Goya was an artist who was fascinated by the darker side of human nature, especially in his later works. He explored themes like social injustice, violence, madness, and the things that don't make sense. His work often has a nightmarish quality to it, and it delves into the subjective and emotional realities of human experience. When Camblin talked about remaking Goya for the 20th century, he probably meant that he wanted to tap into that same raw exploration of what it means to be human, but using the visual language and psychology of his time. He might have incorporated some elements of surrealism, but ultimately I think he was after something even deeper and more profound, The fact that he was influenced by artists like Cremoni and Etruscan terracotta figurines shows that he was interested in capturing the essence of human form and emotion in a way that felt both ancient and modern, raw and expressive.
And he didn't just jot these ideas down. His large-scale drawings were the final pieces, and he often left his corrections visible. That's a pretty honest approach to art making, and it puts the focus on the process of creation.
It definitely does. It's like he's saying that the journey is just as important as the destination. The visible corrections become part of the artwork's history, a record of his thinking process. It invites us to think about how he created the piece.
Even the way he used color was interesting. It says he used color mostly to harmonize with the drawings, not just for aesthetic reasons. It sounds like every element of his work had a purpose beyond just looking good.
Yeah, exactly. It's like he's saying that every line, every shape, every color, every word was chosen for a reason. It wasn't just about making something pretty. He wanted his art to have a deeper meaning, to make you think.
And as his career went on, the biography mentions that his work became more cryptic. It says he was really focused on the cycles of life and metamorphosis. It sounds like as he got older, his art became more internal and symbolic.
Yeah, it's like he was going on this journey inward, focusing more on transformation, death, and the connections between all living things. That's a common path for artists. The deeper they go into their own vision, and the more they wrestle with big questions, the more personal and symbolic their work becomes.
And this idea that his art unfolds slowly over time, even after years of looking at it, really speaks to how much depth and complexity there is in his work. You can't just glance at it and get it. You have to really spend time with it.
You really do. His art isn't meant to be understood in a quick glance. It takes time and patience to see all the layers and how he challenges our perceptions. It's like a time-release capsule of ideas.
Let's look at some of his quotes from that Quotes and Other Mysteries document. This one's great. Fortunately, some things remain forever, or another 10 years perhaps. It's funny and also a little bit sad because it reminds us that even things we think will last forever eventually change or disappear.
It does. It's this simple observation about how fleeting life is, even the things that seem really solid. He's poking fun at this idea of permanence.
Here's another. Look into the atom, you get what you need. Look into magic, and you get what you need. Philosophy and art are in both. That's really interesting because it puts science and mysticism together as ways of understanding the world.
It shows that he believed you could find truth in both rational, scientific ways and through intuition, spirituality, or art. He didn't think these ways of knowing were separate.
Step off the train of thought to find the power that is no power. To do the work that is not work. To laugh the true laugh. Bending is not bowing. This one almost sounds like a Zen saying. It's like he's telling us to let go of rigid thinking and be more in the moment.
Absolutely. He's talking about how limited our logical thinking can be and how much more we can see and do when we step outside those boundaries. Bending is not bowing is about being resilient and adaptable without giving in.
He seems to be really interested in this balance between resisting and submitting. It comes up a lot in his writing.
It's something we all struggle with. When do we push back? When do we let go? I think his work and his words show that he spent a lot of time thinking about this, and maybe he's suggesting that true strength comes from knowing when to do each.
When understood, all truth is funny. That's a great one. It suggests that when we really understand something, we can find humor and a new perspective on even the most serious things.
Yeah, it implies that deep understanding can bring a sense of lightness, help us not take ourselves or our beliefs too seriously.
Flow and think of what you are doing, not what you plan to do. Step off the train of thought. This one really emphasizes being present in the moment and trusting the process instead of getting hung up on the outcome.
Yeah, it's about being fully engaged in what you're doing right now, letting go of worry about the future or the past, and trusting the creative process to unfold.
He really seemed to understand the difference between just believing something and actually knowing it from experience. It's an important difference, especially today when we're bombarded with so much information all the time.
It shows that he believed real understanding comes from actually doing and experiencing things, not just accepting what someone tells you or blindly following dogma. It's a more hands-on and maybe even mystical approach to knowledge.
And this idea of magic for seeing being a positive thing, that's a beautiful way to describe how perception can change everything. It's about choosing to see the world in a different way.
It really is. It suggests that there's this power in approaching the world with wonder, curiosity, and openness so that we can see beyond what's obvious and find deeper meaning.
He also recognized that the appeal of something new doesn't last forever, which is a really insightful thing for an artist to say. It seems like he was trying to create something that was more timeless.
It shows that he knew that trends come and go. He probably wanted to create work that resonated on a more fundamental level and lasted longer.
Here's how he viewed mistakes. There are no mistakes. You're doing the best you can. And mistakes are nature's way of telling you to trust your instincts. Or the next mistake could be really bad. It's a really generous and positive way to look at making mistakes in art and in life.
Yeah, he's saying that making mistakes is just part of learning and growing. He's encouraging us to trust our gut and see setbacks as valuable lessons instead of failures.
He talks about arguing over bits of a hologram instead of seeing the whole picture, which I think is really relevant today. We can get so caught up in the details that we miss the big picture.
Yeah, it's a great way to describe how limited our thinking can be when we don't try to see the connections between things. We need to look for a more holistic understanding and recognize how different parts fit into the bigger picture.
He also said that history is believable when creative. It makes you think about how our understanding of the past is shaped by stories and how we interpret things.
It suggests that history isn't just a bunch of facts. It's also about the stories we tell ourselves and the creative ways we connect the past to the present.
Here's one that stuck with me. We are no longer shadows on the cave wall. We are holograms, and the more we get together, the clearer it becomes. It's this amazing image of interconnectedness and how sharing perspectives can help us understand reality better. He's basically taking Plato's allegory of the cave and updating it with a more collaborative worldview.
Yeah, he's saying that we live in a complex, interconnected world. And by connecting and understanding each other's points of view, we can get a clearer picture of the world around us. It's about moving beyond these limited individual perspectives.
Time travel at the speed of enlightenment. This one's just so beautiful and thought-provoking.
It beautifully connects the idea of inner wisdom and understanding with transcending time. He's saying that true insight can free us from the limits of linear time.
He also talked about finding something in nature that completes you and then surrendering to it. That speaks to this deep sense of belonging and a willingness to let go and trust something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, this is just this profound connection with the natural world, this need to find our place in it and then let go and trust.
The ideas of balance and patience come up again and again in his quotes. It seems like those were the core principles behind his life and his art.
They really were. They suggest a way of navigating the complexities of life and being creative with a sense of balance and perseverance. He's saying that true understanding and creation take time.
And lastly, he talks about how his definition of art changed from art for art's sake to art for life's sake, or art for my sake, or art for survival's sake. It sounds like he went from seeing art as this separate thing to seeing it as something really vital to his existence.
It's like he shifted from this detached, purely aesthetic view of art to seeing it as this essential part of being human, something that helps us navigate life's challenges.
Yeah.
It's a much more grounded and human-centered perspective.
Okay, let's talk about his legacy and how his work is being rediscovered. The biography describes him as an iconoclast, someone who defied tradition and left behind a huge body of work that's scattered all over. This has made his work really sought after.
It really has. The fact that his work is hard to come by just adds to the mystery and intrigue. It seems like he wasn't concerned with fame or fortune, just with creating the art he felt compelled to make.
We have quotes from art historians, artists like Earl Staley and Penny Serling, and collectors like Carolyn Farb, and they all paint this picture of Camblin as incredibly talented, influential in the Houston art scene, and always a bit of a mystery. Staley even mentions that Camblin taught him the basics of drawing and painting. Those personal stories really show how much of an impact he had on people.
They do. It's clear that his peers respected him and admired his art. He really helped shape the Houston art scene.
And the reflections from Sandra Jensen Rowland, who was his student and companion, and his close friend Earl Staley, give us this more personal look at the man behind the art. Staley's description of his later studio as a wizard's den filled with all these things he'd collected is so vivid. You can imagine his mind just constantly working, connecting things, making sense of the world.
I know, it's really amazing. It's easy to picture him always searching, collecting, and reinterpreting things, just like he did with his art. The fact that he moved to Oregon and then Louisiana became more reclusive just makes him even more fascinating.
Now there are these efforts to re-examine his work and introduce it to new audiences, which seems like a natural continuation of his artistic journey. It's like his work is still evolving and revealing itself to us.
I agree. His artistic vision and the depth of his philosophical and creative explorations are still relevant today. New generations should get a chance to experience them.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Bob Camblin, what would you say are the key takeaways for the listener? It seems like his life and his art were all about finding the connections between philosophy and creativity, exploring paradoxes and hidden meanings, and always challenging us to look beyond what's obvious, all while being this incredibly enigmatic and mysterious figure.
That's a really great way to put it. Camlin's legacy isn't about giving us easy answers. It's about making us ask questions. He wanted us to look beneath the surface, to accept uncertainty, and to actively find meaning in our lives and in the art we experience.
It really does feel like experiencing Camlin's work is more about participating than just passively observing. Maybe, and this connects to some of the things we've talked about today, maybe the most important insights aren't found in neat conclusions, but in the questions that come up when we encounter something unexpected or that doesn't seem to make sense. So what mystic switch, as Camblin might say, has this exploration of his work flipped in you today? We encourage you to seek out his art if you can, or even just to look at your own life with a fresh perspective, with those Camblin eyes, looking for those hidden puzzles and the deeper meanings that might be hiding in plain sight. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.